which is what we normally start people off as, he explained. I almost gasped aloud. The pay was incredible for a grocery store bagger. My surprise must have been evident because Benny raised his hand to stop my next question, adding, "We value hard work and integrity here, and just a wee bit of discretion." He laughed loudly, slapping his knee. "But in all seriousness," he continued, "there is a non-disclosure agreement that we need you to sign along with the other paperwork." He grinned again, and despite the odd requirement of discretion and the NDA, the salary was double what I was making at my day job, so I was ecstatic at the prospect. Benny went on to explain the benefits. Health coverage and dental are fully covered, but no life insurance. Those policies always seem to have some trouble for some reason. His grin widened as he said this, and it looked even more forced than before. Despite some unsettling implications, I could barely hear the alarm bells over the prospect of my future earnings. I had found a miracle. With the money I could make here and at my day job, I could afford the treatment Danny needed. I didn't need to be asked twice. I eagerly agreed to the offer. Very good decision. Welcome to the She family. Ed, get out here and get our new hire an apron and a tag, and start with the simple version of the bagger training, Benny announced. An unpleasant-looking older man emerged from the back room, holding an apron and moving with a limp that suggested a previous injury. I forced a smile and introduced myself, but the man, Ed, did not reciprocate. He looked me up and down and snorted derisively, a gesture hard not to take offense to. Before I could ask when the training would start, he abruptly asked, "You know Baggin, fella?" Baggin, like bagging groceries. Trying to clarify, I replied, "Well, yeah, I mean, I have a general idea. I've never worked in a grocery store before, but I think I understand the basics of bagging." He paused for an uncomfortably long time, and just as I was about to speak again, he snorted and let out an unpleasant, throaty laugh that ended in a dry coughing fit. After he recovered, he said, "Not like this, I'm guessing. All right then, come on, I'll show you how we do the bagging here and also the other rules. Reckon you better listen close. I ain't one for repeating myself." I nodded, and we started toward the back room when the radio on his belt crackled to life. A very nervous-sounding voice said, "Code Black, repeat, Code Black." Ed's expression soured further. "God damn it, more of them already." He turned and left, grumbling into the walkie-talkie, leaving me near the back room, dumbstruck and unsure of what to do next. What was a Code Black? Why was everyone so concerned about it? Just as I was about to look for someone else, a hand touched my shoulder, and I turned to see a woman whose tag read Assistant Manager Molly. She smiled more genuinely than the others had. "I'm sorry we haven't met. You must be the new hire. I'm Molly, the assistant manager here. I can help you with training and orientation. You can be a great asset here at she said, guiding me toward the backroom doors. As we walked, I noticed several doors that looked like freezers, shelves filled with chemicals, metalworking gear, various pieces of hardware, and crates with gun manufacturers' names on them. What kind of store was this? Molly led me into an office painted in an oppressively bright blue, reminiscent of a kindergarten classroom. The room was sparse, containing only a desk, some chairs, and a file cabinet. The walls were adorned with black characters that looked like calligraphy. Molly motioned for me to sit down across from her at the desk. She rifled through a clipboard, then turned and rummaged through a file cabinet. Suddenly, a shriek echoed outside. I looked toward the door, startled, but Molly didn't react. She returned with a large binder, slamming it onto the desk with a loud crash. "Before training starts, Please fill out this form for your safety and ours, she said, handing me a piece of paper that turned out to be the non-disclosure agreement Benny had mentioned. Though odd, I was too eager to start and signed quickly, not fully realizing the implications of what I was agreeing to keep quiet about. Molly checked the paper, nodded, and said, "Good, that's settled. Let's get started. This is the employee handbook. We only have one, so you'll be doing some light reading. However, since we need the manpower now and Ed was indisposed, I'll go through it with you quickly." She adjusted a dial on her walkie-talkie, glanced at her watch, and then focused back on me. "As a bagger, you are vital in ensuring customers leave satisfied with their purchases. You are one of the last people they will see on their way out. Policy does not allow me to assist customers outside the building," I managed to say, my voice faltering slightly under her intense gaze. She cleared her throat loudly, perhaps to mask some muffled noise I thought I heard from somewhere else in the back room. "The basic rules and code of conduct are as follows," she continued. "You are to bag products to the customer's satisfaction. The first thing you are to ask customers is what type of bags they want. Whatever they say goes, as far as how to bag things and with what bags. You are not to ask about or discuss the purchases of the customers, no matter how curious you are or how talkative they might be. No questions, period. Understood?" She slammed her fist on the binder, and I jumped back, startled as she looked at me. I stammered out a quick acknowledgement. Yes, understood." "Good," she said, and continued with the list. "No assistance may be provided to customers for loading or unloading things from their vehicles. If a customer requests help to their vehicle, do not under any circumstances assist or leave the building with them, or any customer at any time, regardless of the story they give you as to why they need help. It is our policy, and they know this. If requests persist, or you are feeling intimidated or threatened, you are to press the yellow button at the end of each checkout by the bagging station. A security personnel will escort the offending customer to aisle 4 for processing and detainment." "Wait, detainment? They don't just kick them out," I thought, finding it weird. She continued with the next rule before I could ask about it. "The most important rule, occasionally there will be a special bag request. You will know it when you hear it. If ordered, press the black button by the end of the checkout and proceed with code black protocol. These guests are normally our highest-paying customers and often are here at the pleasure of Mr. Shi himself. They must be attended to as quickly as possible." There it was, code black again. What special bag was she talking about? Ignoring the look of concern spreading over my face, she continued. "Cell phones, smartwatches, or quite literally anything that could be used as a recording device are strictly prohibited while on duty, both for our customers' sake and for our own. The store closes at 4 a.m. exactly. Any customers who remain will be escorted out. The only exception being any customers who are involved in a code black. No access is allowed to the basement and inventory back rooms, only managers and stock employees are allowed. Simple, right? Any questions?" she asked while flashing another smile. "Well, I did have a few questions about," she cut me off mid-sentence, talking over me and saying, "Good, I knew you looked like a fast learner. Come on, let's get you out to the check stands and start bagging." She grabbed my shoulder surprisingly hard and pulled me out of the office and back into the store proper. I saw a few customers look at me as I was being pulled along, and I saw some snickers. I felt a bit embarrassed. I was led to a checkout with a flickering number 3 next to it. The other 2 were busy with customers waiting in line to be helped by a cashier and bagger a few feet away from where I would be standing. We stopped, and Molly cleared her throat loudly to get the attention of a young man with dirty blonde hair and a rather unimpressed expression on his face. "Hello, Lee. This is our new bagger. Show him the ropes and try to be easy on him, it's his first day. I know it's busy, but we don't need another Rob situation so soon. Have fun, you two." She walked away without another word to the back room, and I was left there with Lee, who was staring at me. I tried to break the ice. "Hi, my name is..." "Save it," he responded abruptly. "I don't want to get attached, just in case." I liked Rob, he was my friend, and now, well, now it's best not to talk about what happened to him. Just do your job and follow the rules, and you should be fine. I didn't know how to respond to the blunt introduction, but I figured he seemed nicer than that Ed guy, so I just walked up to the bagging station, gave him a mock salute, and tried to put a smile on my face. It was going to be a long night. The first customer came through, and Lee wordlessly scanned their items. I proceeded to grab a few nearby bags when I felt a sharp kick in my leg. Lee was glaring at me as if I had just slapped his mother. What? I thought. I was supposed to. Then I looked at the customer, who was frowning at me, and I remembered. "Hello, what type of bag would you like?" The customer, an older woman, sneered at me and finally accepted the question, saying flatly, "Paper, please," and did her best to pretend I didn't exist while I was bagging her items, mostly groceries, produce, meat, and dairy. There were a few odd pieces, like a set of kitchen knives and what looked like boxes of some sort of firearm ammunition. I was about to ask about them when I remembered the rules. I tried to ignore it and just carry on. She left wordlessly, and more customers piled into our line as the night went on. I started to see less normal items and more disturbing things. One customer had bought zip ties, large volumes of what looked like medical-grade sedatives, and several bags of candy. Another bought an ungodly amount of various weapons ammunition and several large fruits like watermelon and honeydew. I thought he might be just shooting some fruit for target practice until I saw what appeared to be a Kevlar vest and an uncomfortable amount of alcohol. After a dozen very disturbing customers came through, I finally found someone who seemed a bit friendly. She was a kindly old woman who seemed to enjoy speaking to me, and by all accounts was very nice. It was a much-needed reprieve, and I actually enjoyed talking with her. Her name was Marge, and she was just buying some baking supplies, eggs, butter, flour, spices, all pretty normal things. "You simply must try my raspberry tart, it is divine. I will bring some by next time, or better yet, I think I still have some in my car. Won't you be a doll and help an old woman with her groceries?" I was about to accept when I saw Lee's face go blank, and he just shook his head. I looked back at Marge, who had a wide grin on her face, and I looked down at the second half of her groceries yet to be bagged. There were containers of various chemicals including rat poison, bleach, and ammonia. I tried to speak, but I froze as she asked again, "Come on, dearie, my hip is in bad shape after my fall. It will only be a moment, and you can have a treat and a nice tip as well." Her grin shifted in a way that made me very uncomfortable, and I struggled to speak but finally blurted out, "No, thank you. Store policy does not allow me to assist customers outside the building." Knuckle duster and without a word, dragged the unconscious man away. The other customers watched in silent horror and then quickly resumed their transactions as if nothing had happened. I stood there, shaking, barely able to process the brutality I had just witnessed. As I struggled to regain my composure, Lee came over to me, looking equally shaken but trying to maintain a facade of normalcy. "You did good by hitting that button," he whispered, giving me a quick pat on the back before hurrying back to his station. The night dragged on, with the heavy air of what had just transpired hanging over us. The policy stated that we are not to escort customers out of the store under any conditions. Her grin vanished, and a grimace of anger flared up briefly. "Oh well, your loss, I suppose. I thought I might get one of the new ones before you figured out. Next time, Sonny, I might just find where you live and make a house call." She winked at me and pushed her cart away. I was shocked and horrified at the implications of what had just happened. Lee elbowed me in the side and gestured to the customer who had taken her place, forcing me to just ignore another uncomfortable encounter that night. After a long shift of bagging goods for an assortment of disturbing individuals, I realized my work was done when a screeching PA system informed everyone in the store that it was now 4 a.m. and we were closing. If you have not purchased your items already, then you must leave. If you are loading goods, a reminder that no employees may leave with you. You must take them and leave. If you do not, they will be confiscated. Any customers lingering in store will be confiscated as well. Geez, they were not joking about the strict closing time. A large group of people I had not seen before moved through the aisles with flashlights and batons. They must have been the store's security team. They seemed overkill and intense, more like paramilitary than grocery store security guards. They were looking for any stragglers, apparently. Just then, the weird announcement about people left behind being confiscated as well seemed kind of concerning with how serious they were about everyone getting out on time. I was ushered out as well, along with the other staff who left wordlessly. I tried to make a quip to Lee, asking if there was ever overtime, but he just kept his head down and ignored my joke. I did not know what kind of operation this was, but the more I learned about it, the more I felt like I had made a mistake in taking the job. I had to keep it for a while longer, at least until I could save enough for Danny's treatment. I worked at She for a few more weeks of uncomfortable conversations and ghoulish and unspeakable items being bagged at the caprice of disturbing and malign customers. I witnessed 2 code blacks in that time, at least, I should say, I overheard them. Lee told me not to look and try to avoid the attention of the customers who ordered them. After the first one, in my second week of work, I did not see Jay, the other bag boy, again. Lee warned me not to ask about him, and I was getting increasingly terrified of what would happen if I got one as well. The only good news I had was that the store paid bi-weekly, and to my surprise, almost no taxes were taken out of my paycheck. I had almost $2,800 from the first 2 weeks of work, a little more, and with a bit of the money I saved up from my other job, I could afford Danny's treatment. I just needed to make it 2 more weeks, and then I could quit and never see that awful place again. I managed to avoid any trouble for my 3rd week, but in my last week, I had a disastrous run-in with a customer. It was what started a sequence of events so horrible that the conclusion still threatens my family's safety and terrifies me to this day. It was around 11 p.m., and things were going okay. Some of the managers were poking around, and there was an odd air of concern and anticipation. Lee told me that the owner, Mr. She himself, would be stopping by at some point that night. I was trying to ask more about the owner when a large bald man came to our checkout. He had horn-rimmed glasses and a large, jolly face that was fixed in a leering stare that made me feel very uncomfortable. He tried to chat with me, but I got very bad vibes from the man. I tried to ignore him, but he kept pressing. Probably one of those who never came back after dealing with a code black situation, I thought grimly. The security guard with the baton bent down over the dazed form of the customer. His eyes were glazed, and he likely had a concussion, but he was still conscious and tried to speak when the security guard seized him by the throat and hoisted him back to his feet. The customer tried to whimper out a soft and confused-sounding "wait, wait." Before he was punched so hard in the chest I thought I heard his ribs break from where I was standing. The helmeted face of the guard turned to me, looked me up and down, and asked, what type of bag was he using? I had no idea what that had to do with anything, but I answered, he was using plastic bags. I heard a chuckle under the mask and helmet of the guard, and he said, too bad he didn't pick paper. Then, the guard dumped out one of the man's bags as he was trying to rise to his feet, placed the plastic bag around the customer's head, and tightened it. To my shock and horror, he proceeded to easily strangle him. I couldn't believe what I was seeing, and after a few moments, it was over. I was speechless, and another guard came over, and they took the customer's body on a stretcher to the back room. Benny, the store manager, had appeared out of nowhere and spoke to us. I am sorry you had to see that, but I am glad you are safe. We take threats very seriously here, and know you all need to be safe in such dangerous times. That is why we keep this place safe from dangerous people like that. I trust what happened here will also be safe and secure with you, right? After all, we wouldn't want you endangered by anyone like that knowing where you live, right?" He smiled at us and left to the back rooms. I understood the veiled threat and realized I would not be able to tell any real authorities or report on this madhouse. Despite that encounter, my night was not done yet, and the worst was yet to come. Lee would not speak to me about what we both saw, and we tried to move on with the night and pretend what we saw didn't happen. It was getting close to 4 a.m., and we would be able to close soon. I was so close to being done with this place and getting out of there and home to my little girl. I just needed to hang on for a couple more days. There were only a few more customers lining up at the checkouts when something odd happened. A well-dressed man went to checkout number 2, and they shut off their light and said the scanner was not working anymore. It seemed fishy since it had been fine all night, but when the guarded looks and concerned faces flashed before me and then back at the well-dressed man, I realized that they might know something I didn't. My heart sank as I realized he might be one of those special customers. I looked over at Lee, and he was visibly sweating and fumbling with the cash register. The man sauntered over to our checkout. He had a small basket with what looked like fine sewing thread, thimbles, and tailoring articles. It also contained a hacksaw, a plaster cast, and several boxes of nails and rivets that seemed to clash with the sewing equipment. By itself, I did not think anything of it and I relaxed a bit. Lee was pale and wordlessly scanned the small items he had after they came down the conveyor. The man turned to me, tipped his hat, and introduced himself. "Good evening, my friend. My name is Henry Jaspin. I work for a little antique clothes shop and I am here to get some materials." I relaxed a bit more. This did not seem too strange. I proceeded to ask, "What type of bags would you like today, Mr. Jaspin?" "Well, my good fellow, I should think paper for the small bits you see here indeed. I found all the tailoring kit I need to make work anyone would be proud of. But what I really need today are some raw materials, so the bag I really need will be a body bag tonight, preferably the larger variety." My mind was racing, my heart pounding. Did he just say he needed a body bag? I was about to ask him to repeat it when it dawned on me. The rules had said, "A special bag request, you will know it when you hear it." I realized I had just encountered my first code black. I forced my trembling body to move, and I pressed the black button under the bagging station. I heard an alert on nearby walkie-talkies, "Code black on number 3, confirmations were heard all around." There was a burst of motion near the back, and I handed Mr. Jaspin his bag of smaller merchandise as Benny approached us. "Good evening, Mr. Jaspin," he managed to choke out the words, seeming uncharacteristically nervous. "Oh, Benny, don't worry. I know what I asked for, and though you are a big fella, I wouldn't dream of picking you. We go too far back. Besides, your skin is terrible. Can you imagine one of our suits on you?" Mr. Jaspin let out a howl of laughter, and Benny followed suit with a nervous chuckle of his own. "Your new employee, however, he has a nice strong jaw and broad shoulders, not as much meat though." He looked me over, and I was confused and terrified at the implication of whatever it was he was talking about. As he was eyeing me, Benny spoke up, saying, "Of course, you are free to pick as you please, but if I could suggest an option, we just picked up a rather unruly fellow who was just processed a few hours ago, and he is on the larger side. Perhaps he would be a good alternative. Of course, Benny, you and your new hire lead the way." I followed Benny in between him and Mr. Jaspin, who was behind us. We went into the back and then through a keycard-locked door that led into the basement. Benny shot me an apologetic look as we descended into the basement, and I beheld what was down there for the first time. The place was very dark and freezing. I thought it might be another type of meat locker, and I was not too far off. When the lights switched on, I had to stifle a gasp of shock and horror. As soon as the room was illuminated, I saw it all. We were surrounded on all sides by rows and rows of body bags, almost all of them full. Corpses leered out of many of them, all in various states of decomposition. I thought I was going to be sick. It looked like a morgue. I realized that we had been dealing with these products the whole time. I laughed quietly to myself in despair when I realized the options were paper, plastic, and apparently body bags. I thought of the conversation about selecting a person. I also thought of the other people who had handled code blacks and had not been seen again, like Rob. Rob was probably one of those who never came back after dealing with a code black situation, I thought grimly. I stood there, my mouth agape, trembling at the horror of the nightmare room before me, while it all unfolded in stark terror. Mr. Jaspin calmly perused through the inventory of corpses, scrutinizing them, pinching a cheek here and there, giving a tut or moan of disdain as he inspected each one. He came across the body Benny had pointed out and remarked, My, he is a big fellow, a lot of material. They would love to use. Skin is a little dry in places, a touch of eczema. That is all right, though. Benny, old chum, you have a deal. I will tell Mr. She. Benny sighed in relief and started to guide me out of that nightmare dungeon. As we were leaving, I caught a look at Mr. Jaspin's pick, and I held my hand over my mouth to avoid gasping out loud. It was the belligerent customer from earlier, with a large dent on his face from when it was smashed in by security. The face had a deathly pallor, and his eyes were still leering even in death. Why in the hell was he down here in a body bag, and why did it sound like he had just been purchased? My mind was grasping for rationalizations for how and why this was all happening. Suddenly, Mr. Jaspin caught my hand and proceeded to place a card into my palm. As for you, my fine friend, we would love to have a worker like you at our establishment. She runs a tight ship here, but we are a bit more free-spirited at the tailor. Take care, and he departed with his horrific purchase. I was ushered upstairs in a daze, and I vaguely heard Benny talking with someone. I snapped back to my senses and saw a new face looking at me, an older man with very intense, unblinking eyes that seemed to bore into my soul. As I stood there, he spoke to me in a stern but oddly soothing voice. I know you might be unsettled by what you saw, but death and the means to access it are natural parts of life. It is what you saw, it is what we sell. We sell it in all its forms. Why, it is even in our name. I hope you understand and do not consider doing anything foolish over the next few days. We value your work, but understand that some people lack the fortitude to deal with what our business entails. Just don't forget that when you head back home to your house on 4th Avenue, the large cherry tree at the end of the street is blossoming and looks beautiful. You should take your daughter to see it while it still blooms. He placed a hand on my shoulder and squeezed as he departed. I had no idea what I had just witnessed, but I knew I was in trouble. My mind was a jumble, and besides the imminent threat, I found myself considering something unrelated, a name. I thought about what Mr. She had said about She Knew and how we sell it. I looked again at the sign as I was leaving, She's Nighttime Convenience and Grocery. I hadn't thought anything of it at first, but I looked closer at the kanji by the first word. Looking up the meaning on my phone, I saw it was indeed the kanji for sure, sometimes used when counting as the number 4 in Japanese but more often associated with something else. The dawning horror and simplicity of the name made sense now. Sure more often translates to death. I had worked almost an entire month at Death's Nighttime Convenience and Grocery. I did not go back. I quit. I would find another way to make the rest of the money I needed. My family's safety is what is important now, and I know it is not safe for me and Danny here anymore. How could it be when Mr. Death knows where we live?